So, what is a capital ship, and what does it do for the story? Um, well, to start off with, I use a slightly unusual definition for a capital ship. Um, that's just because it makes it easier to identify what it is, where it is in the story, and it also excludes a few things. So, my definition is any ship sufficiently large and capable enough to act as the center to a fleet. The reason I use this particular definition is this will exclude cargo ships, such as the Lucrehulk, when it isn't fully armed. Um, that means what you're looking at, and you have because the Lucrehulk, if you don't know, is the big ship that the Trade Federation has in Episode 1, and that thing is absolutely massive. But in its normal, unmilitarized form, there is no way you are taking a Lucrehulk into battle at all. Like it's just going to get destroyed. It doesn't have anywhere near the firepower necessary. But on the flip side, if you start sticking guns on that thing, it's definitely capable of being the center of the fleet. It's huge. It has a ton of armor. It gets plenty of guns just due to its sheer size, and it has plenty of shielding. So you can stick that as the center of a fleet. It's going to take damage. It's going to put out damage, and it's difficult to destroy it as an individual. Sending one squadron of Y-Wings on a bombing run against a capital ship isn't typically going to destroy it. You have to do other things. You have to distract the ship. You have to absorb its fire. You have to either counter it with another capital ship, something. You have to handle this ship, and you can't just send off one person to go deal with it. And this works in reverse. This is something where if your good guys or the heroes of your story have a capital ship, it's kind of a problem solver on things that aren't capital ships. Now, there are exceptions due to the fact that some capital ships, specifically such as the Imperial Tector class, that just are really bad at dealing with fighters. So the Tector is particularly vulnerable to fighters. But by and large, most capital ships are able to deal with a squadron of fighters no problem. They can deal with most things that aren't capital ships without any real issue in a one-on-one fight. The exception being a dreadnought. And just a short definition for dreadnought. A dreadnought is any ship that is a fleet unto itself. That's it. So, when you're using a capital ship in a story, it provides you with a lot of firepower, but it also slows down the pace. This is due to the fact that capital ships are generally very hefty suckers. They don't move quickly, but they take a ton of damage. So it's a great way to go in and have a kind of a deus ex machina, if you will, where you have a friendly fleet comes in and problems just start getting solved because now you have two new capital ships on your side that they showed up behind a bunch of enemy frigates, and they're just wrecking shop because they're capital ships. So it's great for reinforcements. It's great for kind of like dragging things out. You can make stalemate lines with this because again, they slow everything down for the most part. They also raise how many people are in a situation, but due to the way that the human mind works, that only works so far. You know the difference between 1 million people in danger and 2 billion people in danger doesn't really compute for a person. So try not to get too out of hand with it. The Battle of Exegol is an excellent example of getting out of hand with this. Basically, having a huge fleet of Star Destroyers is completely useless. Especially if they have like a button to destroy them, which is the Super Laser Arm Drone. They don't serve their purpose right. You have one faceless massive army shooting at another faceless massive army, and if you're supposed to care about it, you don't. Like it's too big. So you need to be careful with your fleet sizes, and you need to make sure that people understand what is it that you actually care about is going to be destroyed once you actually have these large fleet actions. And if you compare this to, say, Episode 2, where you have a bunch of clones charging at a bunch of droids at the very end of the episode, and they're all shooting at each other, you don't actually care if the clones or the troopers die, and that's barely ever focused on. And it's known because that's not what happens. What you care about is whether or not Dooku escapes the planet. So the battle, despite it being massive, isn't focused on. The same exact thing happens in episode 3, where there is a massive fleet battle. There are a ton of explosions. It's very good spectacle. But the only thing you really care about at the beginning of that episode is Obi-Wan and Anakin. So even though you get Oddball and the Starfighter joining them for a short period of time, you don't see Oddball's Starfighter fight for very long because it's not really relevant to the story at that point. You care that Anakin and Obi-Wan make it to the Invisible Hand, save, Palpatine. That's really about all that you actually care about. So that's what gets focused on. There is a fleet in the background, but the foreground is not your capital ships. They're just generally too big to actually care about. So when you keep that in mind, make sure you use them properly. Try not to get too out of hand with their numbers. You can do so, it's possible. But they slow down the story a bunch. It's great for rescue missions, but at the same time, most people don't actually care if 1 or 2 of them die, even in a fleet of 3. You really only usually care about 1 ship. It's just their size, it's a side effect.